Chartwell, it's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you for welcoming us into your home down in Devon. So tell us a bit about your Mbira story. How did it all begin for you?
Well, it started when I was very young, maybe around 4 or 5. You never put an actual date on these things. I grew up in a small village north of Harare in Zimbabwe, and I was surrounded by Mbira. My brother could play, my cousin, all elder people in the village were playing, and so it was not like I would have to go to a lesson. You grow up with it. The Mbiras are everywhere. And then you pick it, and then they say, no, you don't do it like that. And so I never really had the idea that I am going to be a Mbira player. But it all just happened until, in retrospect, later on, I realized, okay, I have to play this for my life, really. In the village, there is a dari, which is a spiritual hut, a round hut. This is where the ceremony takes place. And the Mbira ceremony is like an institution, really. It's like everything to do with life. That's where the people connect with the spirits of the ancestors. And these ritual ceremonies are called Mbira, where the Mbira and singing and drumming takes place for the whole night, because you don't know which song the ancestors are going to like, so you have to go through the Mbira pieces, maybe singing and drumming. But the people who gather have to participate. They come knowing that we're going to sing and dance and create this atmosphere that then puts people into trance, and the spirits of the ancestors come and they give protection and daily guidance.
Wow, that sounds like a very very mystical tradition.
Yes.
And a very ancient one. Is there any idea of how far back the Mbira tradition goes into the mists of time, into the history of the Shona people?
I would say as long as the people were there, but the missionaries go back to 1400. This guy called Dos Santos, a Portuguese explorer guy who came from Mozambique into Zimbabwe, wrote about the Mbira in 1400. So that's like the artifacts, archive, sort of Western idea was 1400.
Okay. And I understand that during the colonial period, that Mbira was suppressed to a degree because missionaries feared that this link with the ancestral spirits. Is that true?
It is true that the Mbira was banned, and actually spirit mediums were put into prison, and some of them were sentenced to death, some of them were hanged, because the missionaries, they brought the Bible. It's a bit like the Bible on the left hand and the gun on the right hand behind. So they came, they colonized people by not understanding the culture of connecting with the ancestors. They wanted to pass their message about Jesus Christ in the Bible. So the only way they could do that is by dividing and ruling. So they discouraged this idea of connecting with the spirits of the ancestors, and the Mbira was banned, the ceremonies were banned, and because there was rebellion through the spirit mediums, like the whole story of Zimbabwe is based on a woman spirit medium called Ambuya Nehanda, and she was a woman who led the rebellion from colonialism, and the missionaries didn't like this. So they hanged her and cut her head off and brought it to England for archaeological and anthropological studies. And even until today, we don't have her head. And this is 1897 when this happened. So they thought that connecting with the ancestors is the act of devil. So even now, there's a lot of people confused. There's big churches going on in Africa and in Zimbabwe. And people are saying, no, we don't go to the ancestors because they are all to do with the devil. And the whole colonial mentality is still there.
Sure.
Even here, in England, I play Mbira. There's a lot of Zimbabwean people who don't believe in it. They think, sometimes if I teach English people or Western people to play Mbira, then some Zimbabwean people would say, that's the instrument from my culture. But for them to do it from me, they think I'm doing something to connect with the devil. And, it's this whole terminology as well of saying spirit possession. I mean, we don't talk like that in my culture. It's the spirit is like, comes to a pocket, like a vessel, like temporarily inhabit into a spirit medium for the night and then goes away. But when they say spirit possession, it's like, something dangerous.
And it's, what you speak of there, it seems a symptom of, like you say, the mind control and the conditioning of the colonial period, and us being really cut off from who we are. And for me, that ties into a question I want to ask as well, which is to do with, obviously we've touched on the spiritual aspect of Mbira music. And I was just thinking, listening to the music and also then listening to the lyrics of some Zimbabwean artists who are heavily influenced by traditional music, such as Thomas Matfumo, who you used to play with in the Blacks Unlimited.
Yes.
Listening to the thoughtfulness, the poetic nature, and the sorrow in the lyrics and the music, and then comparing that to a lot of the lyrics you hear in Western music, and it feels like to me that there's something missing. And I think, would you agree that more and more people in the West are starting to wake up to the fact that there's something missing in terms of spirituality in the culture and the music?
Definitely. That's why all I do here in England for the past 20 years was teaching my traditional music. And there's more Western, I don't want to be colorful, white people who are playing Mbira, looking for this spirituality and also identity. For Zimbabwean people or African people who come here, there's a element of identity crisis because they come up with that colonial mentality that everything may be running away from this place, Zimbabwe, thinking, I have to go somewhere in England where everything is green, but we know that it's not everything that the colonial masters were preaching about this place is not even there. And this idea of the grass is always greener somewhere where it's not home is actually that's the pitfall of Africa as a whole and the people. We don't recognize what we have, and until we have lost it, even if we had not had it. So you can see the distance. We never embraced it when we were in Africa to realize that we have to connect with ourselves through the ancestors. Because sometimes people think, why do we talk about the ancestors? We talk about the ancestors because then we are nearer to the creator of the people, who the Christians call God. We also realize that there's this Mother Earth that we all come from, that created everything. So to connect with that energy, we go through the ancestors, because they are the nearest to that place, because they are the ones who, my DNA, if you say, where are my ancestors, they are in my blood, really. And it's how do I recognize that I have this in me, with me, everywhere I go, and this is me.
Sure, no, that's powerful, and I think there's a lot to be said for each person connecting with source, because what we're talking about here is connecting with who we really are, beyond the illusion, and that for me is really a missing link, actually, in terms of pushing things forward, activism, building community and building movements that can break all these chains which operate on many levels, across the world. And even people in this country now and in the past, they were complicit in the colonial expansion in Africa, but they were equally being exploited to make that happen, and often they were being sold the grass is greener. You go to Zimbabwe, you settle there, you might not be so rich here, you can be rich there, and then they go there and then they become the white settlers, and it all becomes very violent, and so it's exploitation and spiritual warfare on many levels.
And of course, I talk about the spirit mediums being detained and some of them being hanged. That concept came from here. There were women, we go as far as suffragettes, even before that, there were women who were powerful spiritual women who were seen as witches, and they were hanged and quartered, and that means hang them, cut them into 4 pieces and burn them because they are witches. And I was in America, I heard that there was the women, the same powerful women, were asked to swim, and if they sink, they are not witches. If they float, they are witches, and then they are killed. So you think that concept was taken to the colonies, and it was sold to people. It's like, oh, let's kneel down, close our eyes and pray. And we all do this. And we open our eyes. The land is gone.
Sure. And, what you're just saying there ties in very strongly, going back to this theme of the lack of something being missing here in the West in terms of music and culture. Talking about the witch hunts, it's no wonder that many people in the West are turning to shamanic traditions from other parts of the world. People, shamans who would have been classed as witches back during the witch hunts. It's no wonder that that sort of shamanism was wiped out, or must have been wiped out in Europe, because it must have been there, because it is there always when societies are in touch with themselves and nature.
Yes.
So it's no wonder that people are feeling lost here. And people that have been a victim of the colonial experiment are also feeling lost, because it's that homogenization of culture and marginalization of shamanism. It's interesting.
And cleansing, basically. That's what it is. It's like, let's get rid of them. And I also look at it as a scientific project, really. It's science and spirituality. Do they really go together? Do the scientists agree that there's something in between, or is it 0-1? That's where the problems, until we educate the scientists to know that there's something about the spirit that cannot be measured. It's a bit like if I play my Mbira and it does something to you and you feel like the ancestor is coming through you. We cannot measure that. We cannot measure how many cycles per second is the spirit traveling to go into your body. So science tells us if we can't measure that, it doesn't exist, because we don't have an apparatus that can measure the movement of the spirit.
it's very difficult to measure love, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very hard to measure love. One theme that we're very interested in as part of the Vitality Project is the role of music and healing together. So could you tell us a bit about that in the context of Mbira? Is Mbira used in traditional Shona culture for healing purposes?
Yes. I grew up in the village, my village where I grew up. If you would have gone there, even today, it's like a hospital. It's like an African hospital. So I used to play Mbira for the spirit medium, the shaman, the man who is still there. And this is a healing spirit. So you get so many people coming with different problems spiritually. I can give you an example of things that I have seen. You see somebody and they say, Zaheer, can you see all these ants? And you look there, you don't see the ants. Just because you didn't see the ants there doesn't mean they are not there. So in other ways, people, when I see things that many people don't see, they think I'm crazy. I've got a problem. Whereas the way I grew up, when you see the ants and you can't see them, then we say, can you tell us more about these ants? Another way of accepting. So I grew up seeing people coming in chains. Because, when we talk about the ancestors, the spiritual connection with the people who belong to us who have died, is imagine if my grandfather killed somebody. Doesn't mean that he's not my grandfather. But the problem comes in life that because my grandfather killed somebody who came from a different place, that spirit of that person is going to follow me in my life because of my connection with my ancestors. So in my culture, then we have a ritual ceremony where we call the spirit of my grandfather and say, tell us what you did. And then we go to that family where my grandfather killed a person and we create a reconciliation and forgiveness. And then that frees my grandfather's spirit and our being, our well-being as people who are living. So we cannot hide away from the things that have gone wrong in the family. So the music, Mbira music, come into this as a healing element of actually calling the spirit of the ancestor. That's, for me, as a Mbira player, I can play Mbira for the whole night. The nail goes away, the blister comes out, it becomes a blood blister. Sometimes it pops, there's blood, but I don't feel the pain. But when I hear the scream of the ancestor coming, it's the best satisfaction. I feel it even myself, that I play this music and the ancestor has come. I feel it inside myself, in my heart. So is the people around in the heart, because then they know, okay, here comes healing now. Because then we have reasoning time with the ancestors and they're telling us what we are doing wrong, how we should connect with nature and everything. And I tell you, most of the spirit mediums in Zimbabwe, they live the way you live when we talk about fatality. That's connecting with nature right there.
How?
What you eat.
So they follow a plant-based diet?
Yeah, of course. Of course. These are the spirit mediums, the shaman. They don't just eat everything, and they have special people who cook special food for them. That sometimes because I like my meat, I think I'm not going to eat that. You have these people living like this, where there's a lot of people eating different things. And that's what makes them special people. And everybody recognizes that. And there's people, especially special people who prepare special food. And sometimes they don't have to eat. If this shaman is going to have a ceremony for the whole night, they don't eat for that whole day. Same as the next day. And you think, what are they living on?
Prana. Yeah, no, it's a powerful thing, and I'm sure. That you must find examples of that throughout the world in these different cultures.
It didn't take me long to see what you are doing and to connect it with Mbira.
Yeah.
Because that's how I grew up.
On the one interesting point that links in with this discussion is to do with the tuning of the instruments. So I'm very interested in the 4-3-2 tuning. For those people out there that aren't aware of this, we tune our instruments to concert A,
440.
440 hertz,
Yes.
because that's what we're told is the standard.
Yeah.
Many people are choosing to now tune their instruments where possible down to A as 4-3-2 because they feel that the ratios and the numbers and the frequencies that come up in that tuning are more in line with universal ratios and numbers, sacred geometry, you might call it.
You're good, man.
But
are you a musician?
I play guitar and I play in 4-3-2, and
okay.
since I switched to playing in 4-3-2, I never go back. But what I'm interested in is, obviously, in the past, we never had electronic tuners.
Yeah.
So did each village tune to what they felt was right? Or was there any...
Spot on.
Yeah.
Each village has got its own way of talking, and the tuning is in the talking. It's like the accents. It's like Cockney, Geordie, Mancunian. That will be the tuning of the music. And, each village is, when you hear people talking, some Shona people, it's like they are singing. But that's just talking. La la is like music, and then that's where the tuning comes from. And this tuning, this idea of tempered tuning, I think we all know in the Western music, they didn't used to have tuners as well. They used to have things that they would hit and listen, something like a little bell or ring that doesn't measure 440. Or they just sang. It's like traditional folk songs. They just sang lament, and that sometimes is still there, but that was kind of made elite by special composers like Beethoven and Bach then, who were doing experiments with sounds, and then tempered tuning. The Germans came in up with this, and in many cases the tuning is actually, they look for something that makes the sound louder, the 440 thing. And so that for me is like elite. This is like classical pompous music that even the Western people, ordinary, we could call them peasant or plebs, people who would live in places like this, they didn't have to go to a theater to listen to an orchestra that is tuned in 440. That is no different from colonialism.
I agree. There's something very, very contrived about the tempered tuning.
Yeah.
As you say, and I think it's a good thing to be reflective in that respect, because a lot of people are noticing that when they stop tuning to 440 and they either just go with how they feel, or they do choose another temper tuning that's lower or higher, but they notice a different quality and that
of sound,
a harshness at the 440, which I think is interesting. A friend of mine, an acquaintance, she's been learning the Ngoni in Mali.
Yes.
And she said that they never use a tuner, but that she measured what they were tuning to, and that it was invariably either 432 or something else, but it was never 440. It was tempo tunings, never 440, which is quite interesting. The
Yeah.
fact that it was 432,
Yeah.
she was reporting that, for me gives some credibility to that as well.
Well, yes. I think, I've I've studied a little bit about where it came from. It's actually for the loudness of the instruments.
The 440?
Yeah. Everything becomes loud, like really loud sound. But I think, if we go to the Arabic tuning and the African tunings, they've got their own effect as well. Some of it, you think like Shona music, when you listen to it, you were talking about Thomas Mapfumo, when you listen to this sound, you think, oh, it's all kind of sound beautiful melodies, but it's liberation songs. They're saying we are going to war, but it's sounding beautiful to the ear. But the lyrics are radical. Whereas here, we think radical, it's got to be yeah. But actually, the people will listen to nice melodies and get the message.
Amazing. I know that's something that's always struck me about Mapfumo's music, that there's such powerful, serious messages.
Yeah.
But there's if you didn't know the lyrics, you'd hear these melodies and think, oh, this is so happy, it's so happy.
It's so happy.
It's a beautiful, beautiful contradiction.
And that's what you get in Africa as well. In generally, people visit, to a village, they hear singing. They say, oh, it's beautiful. It's like, what are they singing about? They're singing about their suffering.
What was it like playing with Mapfumo and the Blacks Unlimited? What was that experience like?
Well, for me to be sitting here, that's where it came from, really. It is a combination of growing up in a village, playing for the spirit medium, until I was more than 18 years old. Then I went into Harare, I joined Thomas. It's that combination of the Western instrumentation, guitars, and I brought the Mbira into that group. So the guitars are getting the Mbira melodies and producing them on guitar. And the idea that Thomas had already made a name of creating songs that are powerful, that even made him go into prison for singing songs inciting people to go to war. The combination of spending time with 8 years with Thomas Mapfumo made me even more radical in ways of how I think. It's like it made me feel more like who I am. It's like you look at me, I'm in Devon with Mbira. It feels like I'm in Zimbabwe because of how I value the Mbira and who I am. It's identity as well. That came all together by spending some time with Thomas.
Amazing. It must have been a very intense few years.
Yeah, it was.
Those guys.
It was, and it took me around the world. We went to Japan, United States, and few other African countries here in Europe, and it was like a dream, really. It's like this kind of roller coaster. It's like a rolling stone. There's this idea of so-called world music, which is another kind of apartheid system where you are bringing your music, but it's being classified as world music, and you think, what is world music? But what world music is a marketing tool. You would think if it's world music, talking about music coming from the rest of the world, that's okay, everything is in there. But you have to go in the record shop and you see all this mainstream display extravaganza, and you go into a little corner. You're lucky to find even Mbira music there. That's world music. So it was riding on that, things like WOMAD, Real World, and going into places. But you see, people in general don't buy this idea of the marketing tool. They're following the music. like we talked about before, the energy, the spirituality of the music that people can hear, even though it's being produced on guitars, they are producing different melodies from what they are used to. It's almost comparing it to blues or jazz, but it's not exactly. So this is the African music diaspora, really, that you get African people moving as slaves and keep what they have and create something, and it goes back to Africa, and African people hears it. They say, this sounds like our music. It's their music, except it has been changed a little bit. And so this idea of how people connect into African music is through the genres that they know: blues, jazz, rock. They say, that sounds like Alifa Katole. This Alifa Katole is like desert music, but it sounds like blues. It is African music. So you get me playing Mbira with the band, and the instrument, the guitars pick the same Mbira melodies, and then when they come through the guitar, they are amplified 440. And they're sounding like something that they have never even heard in an orchestra, in a concert hall. So the African music is now kind of roller coasting through. So, it's like the missionaries brought the guitar, and the African people get the guitar. They didn't play hymns only. They played hymns, but they also played their music on a guitar. So you could actually look at the guitar as the most powerful instrument of the West that has gone into different places, and people take it and do what they... So that I can juxtapose with what I'm doing with Mbira. The guitar was accepted by African people, even though we can go back and say, okay, the Ngoni, the Kora, they were African guitars, but not as developed as 6-string or 12-string. But I bring the Mbira, and the Western people are interested in it, and they get it. They are not playing it in a ritual ceremony, but there's something about the spirit of the instrument that is very powerful in their perception of the African sound. So you could call me an African missionary with my Mbira.
It's a good mission to be on. It's a very good mission to be on, because it's like you say, there is something visceral about the sound, and when it hooks someone in, it really hooks them in, and it really hypnotizes them. Definitely. And it does connect. It connects in a special place, like all the best music, beyond words.
Yeah, it connects with the heart. It's music of the heart. It's not just up here. You have to feel it in the body, and that is where the music of the ancestors hit. Not only in Shona, there's so many music that is used spiritually like that. People have to hear it, and it vibrates in the body, and then people go into trance, and then the ancestors come.